Awesome. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. My name is Maria Dismondy, and I am the founder and CEO of Cardinal Rule Press. We are located over here in Michigan, and we are producing children's picture books. And we are doing this amazing fall series with different picture book writers and illustrators as well. We had a writer and illustrator on last week. And we're highlighting their journeys, and we're sharing inspiration with you that your dreams as a writer can come true. But it's definitely going to take some grit, some work, some patience, and we will hear all about that today with Laura Gehl. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So Laura's tuning in from Maryland, and I reached out to Laura because our family really enjoys, we have, our youngest is 4. We love picture books, and this is one that we can't get enough of. So let's begin, Laura. We're going to get to this part, but I want to take our listeners way back. I want to hear, oh, good, we have some people tuning in. I want to hear how you got started. Were you always a writer as maybe a child?
I was definitely a writer as a child. I recently was going through boxes in the attic of the house that I grew up in, and I found an old picture book that I didn't even remember having written. It's called The Diving Contest, and it was so fun to read it, and I of course illustrated it myself, and it was so fun to see that book that I had put, it was obvious, hours and hours and hours of love and work into back then. I remembered one other picture book that I had written as a kid, The Magic Sofa, but I hadn't remembered The Diving Contest, so it was exciting to find it in the attic. But I didn't expect to grow up to be a writer. I thought I was going to be a chemist. That was my plan at that age.
Yeah. So did you go to school to become a chemist, like through university, or?
I didn't. By the time I was in college, I thought I was going to be a psychologist, and then I wanted to be a child psychologist because I've always wanted to make the world better for kids, but I discovered I didn't really have the temperament. Just working with kids who had these giant problems made me extremely sad, and a really good psychologist can leave the kids' problems at work, and I could not do that. I couldn't separate it, and so it just made me feel sad all the time. So that career also got shelved. So I ended up going into science. I got a PhD in neuroscience, actually, and for years I was a science writer. But then I started moving back, as that was sort of the path back into writing, I guess, was the science writing, and then gradually I moved into writing books.
So we have to go back to your journey because it's really unique. I think all children, all teachers, anyone who wants to become a writer needs to really listen to these authors tell their story, because writing was always part of what you wanted to do. You loved to write as a kid, and then you wanted to help children. You knew you wanted to do something that helped children. And so part of your journey is trying out different careers. And I don't think it's common for someone to go to school and say, I know exactly what I want to do. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I thought I would be a teacher for the rest of my life. And I taught for just over a decade, and I never thought my path would go in another direction, but it did. And so did yours. And I think that's really—
I was a teacher too. I think a lot of children's authors are former teachers.
Yeah. And I do love that. I think part of the journey is what makes authors so special, because you have this experience that you bring into your writing, because guess what, Laura, you're making a difference in the lives of children through picture books. So let's talk about that first book. I want to hear, you decided to write it. Just tell us like the picture of that very first book.
Right. So actually the book you held up, that was my first book. And
it was a good one. A good first one.
Yeah, my baby was, well, now he's 14. He was a baby back then. And he was up a lot in the middle of the night. And one of those times I was up with him in the middle of the night, and the term or the phrase, one big pair of underwear, just popped into my head, and I scribbled it down. And then two brown bears that hate to share, scribbled it down. And that's pretty much how that book was written, was in little bits and pieces. I was working in a lab. I had a new baby.
You're
and
probably tired, very tired.
Working with the rhyme as kind of just a total break from the lab and from being a mom, and it was just complete and utter joy. That's all it was. And then my mom read it and she said, "This is the best book I've ever written. This could be published." And of course, I thought she was ridiculous because that's just such a mom thing to say. And it, it took 10 years from when I wrote it until when it was actually published. So,
which is not uncommon. I was just looking to see who is the publisher on this book.
That one is from Beach Lane, which is part of Simon & Schuster.
Okay, so you submitted the book and it took 10 years, or you waited?
No, I mean, it was like, so many different things going on. And at first, I didn't know how to submit to a publisher. So I tried submitting it to a contest. And at that point, my mom had truly convinced me that this was the best book ever written. And I thought, it's going to win this contest.
As mothers should.
But, the funny thing is, I didn't actually have that kind of mom. My mom was the kind of mom who would only say something was great if she really thought it was great.
Oh, I love
that's kind of why I believed her after a while, because she was not the kind of mom who told you everything you did was so fabulous. And so the fact that she thought it was so fantastic, I started to think, it is fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to win this contest. And of course I didn't. And then I submitted it to some agents and they had no interest because no agent wants a rhyming picture book. That is like the worst possible thing to submit to an agent. And then I just got really lucky, which is a part of everybody's story for sure. And I just read something in my college's alumni magazine about someone who had recently started working for a publisher. And I thought, I'll email her and ask her advice about what I should do in order to explore how to get this published. And she was so nice, and she had just started out. This is Emma Ledbetter, who is now a successful editor, but at the time she was I think an intern or an assistant, or at least at the very beginning of her career also. And so she was so kind and said, just send me your manuscript. I'd be happy to take a look at it. And after she read it, she said, I think this might be a good fit for Beach Lane. And she sent it on to her bosses, and she said, that's going to be a really long time probably before we hear back. And then it was like 2 days later, she said, they love it and they want to buy it. So that was it was critical. And then it took from that point several years before it was actually published, but that was kind of the beginning of actually being a published author.
So cool. And Melanie Glickman is commenting, and she said, what a fascinating path. It's so inspirational how you've lived life with plans and then let it flow somewhere else naturally and beautifully. So that was a very nice comment. And something I picked up on with your story is those connections, how important connections truly can be. Because I've interviewed agents, I've interviewed editors, and what was the numbers? An editor told me that he was receiving 100 manuscripts a month, and he's like, it's the slush pile just built up, and to go through 100 a month. You're right, like the luck of the draw, because you have to make sure if your first couple of sentences aren't hooking someone, it's in the slush pile. So, I think it's okay to reach out. I love that you reached out to her and you said, hey, I want to pick your brain. And I feel like anyone who comes to me and wants to pick my brain, I've always been able to give them my time. And if not my time, I've created resources for them where they will be able to use those resources to help them. If, because this all happened while I had 3 children. But I think it's okay, and don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help and ask for experiences. I think that's really great. Oh,
yeah, people reach out to me all the time now, and depending on where they're coming from, the advice I give is, varies. But I'm never sorry to hear from anyone who's interested in exploring this path. Although I know that many authors, who are more successful than me and probably hear from hundreds of people all the time say, if someone hasn't done their like basic Google this and, do a little internet, then they frustrate. So I guess I would say that as advice to people who are thinking about reaching out to an author, just sort of figure out what you can on your own first, since now there is so much more online than there was back when I was starting out. And
don't be defeated if you don't hear back from them, because sometimes you're in the middle of a project and It takes a lot to respond to emails and to engage in that. So don't feel bad if, you don't hear back from someone. So yes. Laura, let's talk also about the fact, okay, you had this book come out. What year did this first book come out?
2014.
2014. So with the book, and you're in Maryland, with the book, did you do a book tour? Do you do school visits? Can you tell us a little bit about how you use the book to, build on your platform?
Right. Yeah. So that, since it was my first book and I wasn't trying to juggle a lot of books and releases at once, I was able to really pour my heart into promoting that book, which was so much fun because it's called One Big Pair of Underwear. And so, yeah, I was at bookstores and libraries and schools all over the place. And my mother-in-law is the most amazing, well, she's just amazing in general. But one thing she's great at is sewing. And I said, do you think you could make me a really giant pair of underwear? And at first she said, well, I think Target sells like XXXXL or something. And I said, no. I'm talking about underwear that is way too big for any human being. And so I gave her a sense of the scale and she made it for me. And it is so big that like when I would go to a preschool, we could fit the whole class inside. And we have fit up to, I think, 4 librarians, or we've had like, a teacher with a bunch of students, or we've got a bunch of principals in there before. So, traveling around with a giant pair of underwear, you are pretty much an instant success no matter how good your book is.
Hey, so where can we find a picture of this book there on your website?
I think there might be some pictures of it on my website. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to do some digging and I'll post a picture here if I find it.
If not, I can find one to send you. I know various schools have put pictures up over the years with their social media. So there are definitely pictures out there.
So now that your child or children are a little bit older, where are you gaining your inspiration from?
I think still a lot from my children, definitely. I have a book coming out in the spring that's called Dibs, and that one was direct from my son Nathan, who's now 12. He was calling dibs on everything, and so that sparked an idea. And the book is actually about a little boy who says dibs all the time, and then his baby brother, his first word is dibs, but then the baby starts calling dibs on things that you can't call dibs on, like on his parents' bed. And then later it builds up to calling dibs on the White House. And it was just such a funny idea that like there are these rules of dibs and everyone knows them, what you can call dibs on and what you can't. Everyone does that. But in the book, everyone just keeps going by a different rule, which is, okay, you call dibs. So the baby's getting everything he wants. And so it was a really fun book to write. And my son, Nathan, is very excited that it's dedicated to him. This will be his first book that's dedicated just to him. And so I still get lots, probably most of my ideas from my kids, but I'm also just constantly writing down things after I go for a walk or when I'm in the shower. I'll like dash out in a towel and scribble something down.
You are you're the third author who has said their ideas come from the shower.
I think it's because that's the time when you're literally not doing anything else. So your brain has time to process and think, because now we're so connected all the time. Even when I'm doing laundry, I usually am listening to NPR or watching a TV show at the same time. And so when I'm in the woods or when I'm in the shower, those are the times when my brain has the quiet to just process everything that's been going in and kind of spit out these crazy ideas, some of which actually end up making it into books.
That's so cool. Can you tell us a little bit about, we're getting a little echo. But it's only me. So I'll ask my question and let you talk. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? So you have these thoughts, you have these ideas. What do you do next?
So I have a file. It used to be a physical file, and now it's an email file that's just called Picture Book Ideas. And so I'm just constantly, if I have my phone, I'll email myself, or if I have Post-it notes in every part of my house, and I'll scribble down these ideas, and then later I'll collect them and email them to myself. And then so I then have this file in my email called Picture Book Ideas, and anytime I have like a big chunk of writing time, I will look through that file and I'll think, what do I want to try? And sometimes I'll try something. Like the other day, I had this idea that I thought was so great, and I started writing it, and it was a total disaster. So then I'll just go to another idea, and I'll keep going until I have like a workable first draft of one of those ideas. And then that will be something that I'll send off to my critique partners, and will eventually, get revised and revised and revised until it goes to my agent. But those are like my favorite parts of my day, when I actually have a big chunk of writing time. It doesn't happen as much now as it used to, because I'm usually juggling a lot of different manuscripts, and I'll revise this and reply to this editor and look at the sketches for another book, all in the course of a day, plus school visits and what have you. But those are like the times that I live for, the writing time when I'm just starting on something new, and it's so exciting.
What would be a good chunk of time? An hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Like, what do you look for that chunk of time?
Good question. It's a minimum of an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
Minimum. I love, every once in a while, I have a day on my calendar where I still have a physical calendar, and I have a square for each day. And if I look at that day and there's nothing there during the hours that my kids are at school, that is like a miracle. And then I probably would knock out a ton of writing. But even, so long as it's a minimum of an hour without a hard stop. Like if it was exactly an hour and I had to do an interview at the end, then that wouldn't work, because my brain would be too stressed,
Yeah.
But if it was an hour and then I had some other stuff I had to do, but if I was in the zone, I could kind of push it off, then that would be okay. But ideally, like 2 or 3 hours.
Okay. And we are, we're about 17 minutes in, and I don't want to run out of time. I usually say about 20 to 30 minutes, but I do want to talk about your new book, Delivery Bear.
Right. So I grabbed a copy so I could show off the cover, because it's so cute.
Who's the illustrator of that book?
So the illustrator is Paco Sordo, and we worked on this book together, which came out September 1st from Albert Whitman. And one of the things that I love so much about this book is that it has songs in it. And so, I've written some books in rhyme and some books not in rhyme. And this book is not in rhyme, but it has these rhyming songs that can be sung to the tune of the ABCs. And it was so fun to work on the songs. And, someone said to me recently about how much I love the Frances books, Bread and Jam for Frances and A Birthday for Frances. Those were some of my favorite books as a kid. And, I think it was my dad. And I think he said, is that why you put songs in Delivery Bear, because you loved the songs in the Frances books? And I had never made that connection. And I don't know if that's why, but that might have been there, somewhere in the back of my brain, because I feel like those are pretty much the most perfect books ever. So anything I can do to emulate those is certainly a plus. And I really loved writing a book with songs.
Now, if you love writing a book with songs, will you sing the songs when you go to schools? Or you?
Oh, yeah. I'm not imagination a good singer, but kids don't care. And since they easily be sung to the tune of the ABCs, they're easy for me to sing, or for any parent or caregiver or teacher to sing. And also you can actually hear Zogby, this is Zogby the bear, singing them on my website with a ukulele. And so that was actually done by David Smoller, who's a wonderful singer, and he sang them for Zogby. So
I will put a link below for those tuning in. That's, this interview is totally full circle. There's so many, I feel like the universe is tuning in because, one, my favorite books were the Bread and Jam for Frances. I loved those books growing up. And we just interviewed an author, Rob Broder, and his book, Paul and the Ukulele, came out a few weeks ago. And he plays the ukulele as well.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
So, just so many cool connections. And so what number is Delivery Bear? I know you have a couple in the works. You have one coming out. Dibs is coming out next year.
Right. Yeah. So I think Delivery Bear is maybe my 11th or 12th picture book.
That's a lot since 2014.
Yeah. Well, I think it helps that I really love to write. And so I'm just constantly working on new things. Like that part does not ever get old for me. And actually, I was having such a bad week last week. And then I remembered, wait, I know how to cheer myself up. I can write. You know, I was so stressed with stuff going on with my kids, and I just I was just doing the things that had to get done, and I was working on presentations, and then I remembered that I could just write something, and it cheered me up instantly. And so I think that is a huge secret to why I've been able to continue in this business, is that I just love the writing part so much. And so I'm always working on something new. And when something gets rejected, then I think, okay, well, you know, I'm just going to work on something new. So,
and I think it's really key that you allow time in your schedule. Like, you make time for the writing. And if you don't have the time for the writing, you physically feel that. And so then it reminds you that that's something that brings you joy and that you make it happen. That's amazing. That is a lot of books since 2014. I'm impressed. Like, I don't know if you realize not many authors have that many books in that many years.
Well, it has, I mean, as I said earlier, luck plays a big role, and I have a wonderful agent, and I have 2 wonderful critique groups. So I'm so lucky to have a lot of people in my corner.
Well, Miss Laura, we can give them all a little bit of credit, but I'm sorry, the credit is due to you as well. And critique groups is another key point for those of you tuning in. Never, never, ever, ever should you write something, edit yourself, and send it out. It should always be looked over by someone else, whether it be critique group or a professional editor who sits with you and works with you on it before, you know, you really want your work to be polished. And so I love that you have a group. Do you do everything digitally, or are they a local group?
Yeah, so I actually have both. See, I told you I'm so lucky. So I have an online group, which is just focused on picture books. And that group has been going on for years now. And I have not even met every single one of them in person, but it's so integral to my writing process. And then I also have a local group, which we meet in person once a month. We're meeting tonight. And so that group, we look at different ages up through so far, I guess young adult and middle grade. So not just picture books. And I find both groups to be so helpful to my actual writing and also to my sanity, because everyone's sort of going through the same things of rejections and bad reviews, waiting to hear from an editor who said that they were so excited about your project, but then dropped off the face of the earth. And so it's nice to have people who can relate to all of that.
Oh, this interview has been fantastic, filled with tips for writers and filled with your magical journey, which is well-deserved. I want you to remember that. Very well-deserved. Luck doesn't just play a role. So I really appreciate your time. And I'm excited to check out Delivery Bear. I wrote it on my notes.
You're a sticky note person too.
Yeah, they're all over. But I knew there was a new book coming out. And, you know, I like getting books from the library. I really do. We go to the library every week. We'll go later on today. But picture books, I need them to be in our home forever. So I kind of have a little problem with picture books, but
that is a very expensive habit.
It can be. It really can be. But then I justify it because I'm like, well, it's kind of work too. It's market research.
Yeah, tax write-off, absolutely.
But I think what I like about your books is they bring humor, they bring smiles to children's faces. And, you know, we have such a variety of books out there, and you can't just get books that teach. You also have to get books that instill the love of reading and instill that laughter and that humor. So that's what I love about your books.
Oh, thank you. And you know, the funny thing, we talked about how people's paths, you know, work in different ways. And I actually finally in the spring, my desire to be a chemist and then having the scientific training, that's coming back into my books for the first time in the spring. I have some board books coming out that are called the Baby Scientist series, and they sort of introduce kids to these different scientific careers. And the idea is to make it seem like being a scientist is really cool and accessible and not intimidating, and not just for people who know more than you do or who are smarter than you are. And so I'm really excited about that. And it does kind of feel like coming full circle from my childhood love of science, where I actually memorized the periodic table for fun, because that's the kind of kid I was.
And I also think right now with the whole STEM initiative, which I know some people call it STEAM, and then I just heard that there's also a term stream because reading is feeling left out and reading wants to be put into it. I know, reading's in there. But anyway, STEM, science is part of that. And the schools are really trying to bring science and show children that those careers in science are valid and they're accessible for not only boys, but also for girls. So.
Right. Yeah. So we have girl scientists in the series, and I also have a nonfiction biography coming out of the first head of NASA's astronomy program, whose name was Dr. Nancy Grace Roman. She is an amazing woman, and it was really fun to work on her story. It took me many years working on that book. It was so much harder to write a biography than I had ever dreamed, but that one will be out in the fall, and I hope will inspire boys and girls to think about astronomy as a career. There's just so much out there.
There is, and I want everyone tuning in to realize that you have explored many different things, and that's a really cool part of your journey. So Laura, thank you so much for your time today. I loved connecting and meeting you. I don't know if we call this meeting each other, but it's better than just emailing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a pleasure to meet you too, Maria. I feel like we could chat for hours, and I, hope to hear about your journey one of these days, because I'm sure that's a fascinating story too.
Oh, thank you. All right, Laura, we're going to sign off, and I'm going to go look for that big pair of underwear and post a picture below.
Okay. Bye, Maria.
Bye-bye.